Welcome to the channel where American history becomes simple, clear, and meaningful. Here, we don't just study dates and events, we learn English through real stories that shaped the United States. In today's episode, we explore new peoples, their society, culture, and early educational beginnings in the United States. As we move through this story, we'll discover how ordinary people, over time, began to see themselves in a new way, but as Americans. So listen carefully, learn naturally, and travel back in time with us. Let's begin.
New peoples. In the 1600s, America was slowly becoming a land of many peoples. Most settlers came from England, but they were far from alone. In the middle colonies, Dutch, Swedish, and German families built new lives. In the South, a small number of French Protestants settled in places like South Carolina. At the same time, enslaved Africans were forced across the ocean, especially to the southern colonies. Scattered across the land were also Spaniards, Italians, and Portuguese, each adding their own story to the growing population. After 1680, something important changed. England was no longer the main source of new settlers. Instead, many newcomers arrived from Scotland and Northern Ireland. These people, often called the Scots-Irish, were Protestants searching for land and freedom. Across Europe, life was becoming harder. Wars, unfair rulers, and powerful landlords pushed tens of thousands of people to leave their homes. For them, America was not just a place, it was hope. By 1690, the population of the colonies had reached about 250,000 people. From that moment on, the number grew quickly, doubling every 25 years. By 1775, more than 2.5 million people lived in the colonies. Families sometimes moved from one colony to another, but each colony had its own character. These differences became even clearer when looking at the three main regions. Over time, these regions grew apart, shaping the future of America in very different ways. New England. Life in New England was never easy. The land in the Northeast was thin and rocky, winters were long, and flat farmland was rare. For many settlers, farming alone could not support a family. So the people of New England looked for other ways to survive and to grow rich. Fast rivers powered grain mills and sawmills. Huge forests provided strong timber, which quickly led to shipbuilding. With deep natural harbors nearby, the sea became their greatest opportunity. In Massachusetts, fishing changed everything. The cod industry grew fast and brought steady income. Many settlers lived in small towns near the coast, where trade and business became part of daily life. These towns were tightly organized. People shared pasture land and forests while working small farms close to home. Because towns were compact, communities could support schools, churches, and town halls. In these meeting places, citizens gathered to discuss problems and make decisions together. Over time, trade expanded rapidly. By the mid-1600s, Massachusetts Bay was thriving, and Boston rose to become one of the most important ports in America. New England's forests supplied everything needed to build ships: oak for strong hulls, tall pine trees for masts, and pitch to seal the seams. Local shipbuilders did not just build vessels, they sailed them across the world. Step by step, they created a powerful trading network. By the end of the colonial period, 1 out of every 3 British ships had been built in New England. Exports such as fish, ship supplies, and wooden goods flowed out of its ports. But trade also had a darker side. Merchants discovered that rum and enslaved people brought high profits. One of the most common but troubling systems was known as the triangular trade. Ships carried rum from New England to the coast of Africa, where it was exchanged for enslaved people. Those captives were sold in the West Indies, and ships returned home carrying molasses, which was then used to make more rum. This cycle brought wealth to merchants, but it was built on human suffering. New England's success, like much of early America's growth, came with both ambition and deep moral cost.
The Middle Colonies. Life in the Middle Colonies felt very different from New England. Society here was more diverse, more open, and more accepting of differences. Pennsylvania was the best example of this new spirit. Under the leadership of William Penn, the colony grew quickly and remained peaceful. By 1685, nearly 9,000 people were already living there. At the center of the colony stood Philadelphia. It was a carefully planned city, with wide streets lined by trees, solid brick and stone homes, and busy docks along the river. Almost 100 years later, its population had grown to about 30,000 people. Philadelphia became a meeting place for the world. People spoke different languages, followed different religions, and worked in many trades. Thanks to their skill in business and trade, the city developed into one of the most successful centers in the British Empire. Although Quakers were influential in Philadelphia, they were not the only group in Pennsylvania. German settlers played a major role, especially as highly skilled farmers. Many families also worked in small home industries, producing cloth, shoes, furniture, and other handmade goods. Pennsylvania was also a key entry point for the Scots-Irish. They arrived in large numbers during the early 1700s. Often poor and restless, they distrusted the English and were wary of government control. Instead of settling in cities, the Scots-Irish moved into the back country. There, they cleared forests, hunted for food, and survived through small-scale farming. Life was hard, but it offered independence. New York showed America's diversity even more clearly. By the mid-1600s, people from all over Europe lived along the Hudson River. The population included Dutch, French, Scandinavians, English, Germans, Irish, and many others. Even after the Dutch lost control of the colony, their influence remained strong. Their stepped gable roofs became a lasting feature of the city's buildings. Dutch merchants also shaped Manhattan's energetic trading culture. Together, these middle colonies became a place where many cultures met and where the idea of a diverse America truly began to take form.
The Southern Colonies. The Southern Colonies followed a very different path from New England and the Middle Colonies. Here, life was shaped by wide open land, not crowded towns. By the late 1600s, the Society of Virginia and Maryland was built around two main groups. The first were the great planters. They owned large estates, relied on enslaved labor, and controlled the best land along the rivers. With wealth and power, they built grand homes, lived in an elite style, and tried to stay connected to European culture. The second group was the yeoman farmers. They worked smaller farms and valued their independence. Many took part in local assemblies and even held public office. Their strong voices reminded the powerful planters that free men expected their rights to be respected. Farther south, in the Carolinas, settlers learned to mix farming with trade. Markets became places of opportunity, and prosperity grew quickly. The region's thick forests were especially valuable. Lumber, tar, and resin from tall pine trees were in high demand for shipbuilding. Unlike Virginia, the Carolinas were not tied to just one crop. They produced rice and indigo, a deep blue dye made from local plants and used to color cloth. By 1750, more than 100,000 people lived in North and South Carolina.
Charleston, South Carolina, rose as the most important port in the region. Ships arrived and departed daily, carrying goods that connected the South to the wider world. As the coastal areas filled up, many settlers looked inland. German immigrants and Scots-Irish families moved west, avoiding the strong English influence of the coast. Some were searching for better land, others had already worn out their farms. Life on the frontier was harsh. By the 1730s, settlers were pouring into Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. They built simple cabins, cleared forests, and planted corn and wheat. Living close to Native American lands, these families depended on skill and courage to survive. Their clothing was practical. Men often wore buckskin made from deer or sheep, while women spun cloth at home. Meals came from the land: venison, wild turkey, and fish. Even with few comforts, frontier life had moments of joy. People gathered for barbecues, dances, shooting contests, and celebrations for newly married couples. One tradition, quilting together, has survived and remains part of American culture today.
Society, schools, and culture. One powerful idea shaped life in the American colonies. If people felt controlled, they could always move on. The open frontier made it difficult for a strong aristocracy to take root. Whenever powerful leaders along the coast tried to tighten their control over politics, land, or religion, ordinary settlers had another option. They could pack up and head west. Again and again, the threat of mass migration forced colonial leaders to loosen their rules. This constant movement helped protect personal freedom and limited the rise of a ruling elite. At the same time, something else important was taking shape: the foundations of American education and culture. In 1636, Harvard College was founded in Massachusetts. Later came the College of William and Mary in Virginia, and then Yale in Connecticut. These schools trained future leaders, ministers, and thinkers. But even more important was the growth of public education. Puritans believed everyone should read the Bible themselves, so literacy mattered deeply. In 1647, Massachusetts passed a law requiring towns with more than 50 families to open a grammar school. Other New England colonies soon followed. Books were everywhere. Pilgrims and Puritans brought small libraries with them and continued importing books from England. By the 1680s, Boston booksellers were thriving, selling works on history, science, politics, philosophy, and religion. In 1638, the first printing press in the English colonies was installed at Harvard. Printed ideas began to spread faster than ever. Education also grew in Pennsylvania. The first school opened in 1683, teaching reading, writing, and basic accounting. Quaker communities made sure children received elementary education, while advanced learning was offered at the Friends Public School, still operating today as the William Penn Charter School. Philadelphia became a center of learning. Private schools taught languages, math, and science. Even adults could attend night schools. Women were not completely excluded, but their education was limited. Daughters of wealthy families learned skills considered useful at home: languages, music, art, and sometimes bookkeeping. Two men helped shape Pennsylvania's intellectual life more than anyone else. James Logan, a colonial official, owned an exceptional library. A young Benjamin Franklin spent hours there, reading the latest scientific works. Franklin went on to change American culture. He founded a debating club that later became the American Philosophical Society. He helped establish a public academy that grew into the University of Pennsylvania.
He also created a subscription library, allowing ordinary people to borrow books, an idea that spread across North America. In the southern colonies, education followed a different path. Wealthy families hired private tutors or sent their children to England. Because plantations were spread far apart, public schools were rare. Virginia had only a few free schools. Still, the desire to learn reached even the frontier. Scots-Irish settlers living in simple cabins worked hard to bring educated ministers to their communities. Most colonial writing came from New England and focused on religion. Sermons were the most common publications. One minister, Cotton Mather, wrote hundreds of works. Another popular piece was a long poem called The Day of Doom, which described the Last Judgment in frightening detail. In 1704, the colony's first successful newspaper appeared in Massachusetts. By 1745, there were 22 newspapers across British North America. In New York, a landmark moment for press freedom took place. A printer named John Peter Zenger criticized the government in his newspaper. He was arrested and charged with libel. During his trial, Zenger's lawyer argued that the articles were true and therefore not a crime. The jury agreed. Zenger was freed, and the idea of a free press gained strength. As towns grew wealthier, some feared society was becoming too focused on material success. This anxiety helped spark a religious movement in the 1730s called the Great Awakening. Two figures led the movement. George Whitefield, a powerful preacher from England, traveled through the colonies speaking to crowds of thousands. His emotional sermons stirred deep feelings. Jonathan Edwards took a different approach. In his famous sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, he spoke calmly but delivered a terrifying message about sin and salvation. Later, he tried to combine religious belief with Enlightenment ideas. The Great Awakening changed American religion. It weakened established churches, encouraged personal faith, and led to many new denominations. Most importantly, it strengthened the idea that people should follow their own conscience and tolerate the beliefs of others. That belief would become a lasting part of American life.
America was built by many hands, free, unfree, and forgotten. Their stories still matter today. If history helps us understand the present, then remembering these people is a responsibility. If you found this story useful, like the video, subscribe, and continue learning history through stories.